Emma traced the rim of her coffee cup with one finger, watching the ripples form across the surface of the dark liquid. The cafe buzzed with morning activity, laptops opening, conversations flowing, the hiss of the espresso machine punctuating it all. But she barely registered any of it. Her wedding ring caught the light as she moved her hand, and she paused to stare at it. 6 months married, and still it felt foreign on her finger. More coffee? The server's voice broke through her thoughts. Please. Emma replied with a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. At 26, Emma Porter, now Emma Whitman, had been called beautiful her entire life, with her chestnut hair that fell in natural waves past her shoulders, clear gray eyes, and the kind of face that photographers loved for its perfect symmetry. She'd grown accustomed to the admiring glances that followed her. But lately, those glances had changed. Now they often came with whispers, sidelong looks, and occasionally outright disapproval when people saw her with Daniel Whitman, 40 years old, successful architect, and her husband. Emma checked her watch. Their appointment was in 30 minutes. She gathered her things, left cash for the coffee, and stepped out into the crisp autumn air. As she walked, her mind drifted back to that first meeting 2 years ago. Miss Porter, Mr. Whitman will see you now. The receptionist had gestured toward the sleek glass door at the end of the hallway. Emma had straightened her portfolio under her arm and taken a deep breath. Fresh out of design school with impressive grades but little practical experience, she'd been shocked when Whitman and Associates had responded to her application. It was one of the most prestigious architectural firms in Boston. When she'd entered his office, Daniel Whitman had been standing at a drafting table, his back to her. Even from behind, his presence had commanded the room. Broad-shouldered in a tailored charcoal suit, his dark hair peppered with distinguished silver at the temples. Mr. Whitman, she'd said, her voice steadier than she'd felt. He turned, and Emma had found herself caught in the gaze of the most intensely blue eyes she'd ever seen. Not the pale blue of a summer sky, but the deep, complex blue of the ocean. Emma Porter, he'd said, a statement rather than a question. Your professors speak very highly of you. Their interview had lasted over an hour, morphing from professional assessment into a passionate discussion about sustainable design and the responsibility of architects to create spaces that enhance human connection rather than hindering it. By the end, Emma had forgotten to be intimidated. You have remarkable insight for someone at the beginning of their career, he told her as she'd gathered her portfolio to leave. And you're remarkably receptive to new ideas for someone so established in his age, she'd replied, then immediately blushed at her boldness. But Daniel had laughed, a genuine warm sound that transformed his serious face. I believe that's the first time anyone has called me established rather than old in quite some time. Emma had gotten the job, and something else had begun that day, though neither of them had recognized it yet. The medical building loomed ahead, all steel and glass. Emma quickened her pace, scanning the parking lot for Daniel's Audi. Not seeing it, she checked her phone. No messages. He must be running late. She entered the building and rode the elevator to the 5th floor, where the directory led her to a frosted glass door labeled Dr. Elena Kapoor, Oncology. Taking a deep breath, she pushed it open. The waiting room was softly lit, with muted landscape paintings and comfortable chairs. A few other patients waited quietly. Emma approached the reception desk and gave her name. Mrs. Whitman, yes. Your husband called to say he's parking and will be right up, the receptionist said, with a practiced smile. Please fill these out while you wait. Emma settled into a chair and began working through the forms, her pen hesitating over the medical history section. When she reached reason for visit, she wrote follow-up and left it at that. The door opened and Daniel rushed in, his normally impeccable appearance slightly disheveled. His tie was crooked, and a lock of his dark hair fell over his forehead. When he spotted Emma, relief washed over his features. "I'm so sorry," he said, dropping into the chair beside her and taking her hand. "The client meeting ran late, and then traffic was terrible." "It's okay. They haven't called us back yet." Emma squeezed his hand, noticing the fatigue around his eyes. Daniel took the clipboard from her and quickly reviewed what she'd written. "He didn't mention the pain," he said quietly. "I thought I'd discuss that directly with Dr. Kapoor." His jaw tightened slightly, but he nodded. They sat in silence for a few minutes, his thumb absently stroking the back of her hand. "Mrs. and Mr. Whitman?" A nurse appeared at the inner door. "This way, please." They had worked together for 8 months before anything changed between them. Emma had quickly proven herself valuable to the firm, her fresh perspective and talent earning her increasingly important roles in major projects. She and Daniel had developed a seamless professional rapport, often working late into evenings when deadlines loomed. On one such night, with rain lashing against the windows of the nearly empty office, they'd been the last two remaining, hunched over blueprints for a community arts center. "This isn't working," Daniel had said, running a hand through his hair in frustration. "The flow is all wrong. People will feel trapped in this corridor." Emma had studied the plans. "What if we open it up here?" She had sketched quickly on the overlay. "A glass wall looking into the sculpture garden. It gives a sense of expansion and brings nature inside." Daniel had stared at her modification for a long moment, then looked up at her with something new in his expression. "That's brilliant. It completely transforms the space." Their eyes had met across the table, and for the first time, Emma had seen past her boss to the man, passionate about his work, driven by a vision of spaces that could change how people experience their world, lonely despite his success. She'd glimpsed vulnerability beneath his confident exterior. "It's nearly midnight," he'd said, breaking the moment. "Let me drive you home." "I can call a rideshare," she'd protested. "In this weather?" "Please, Emma, I'd feel better knowing you got home safely." The drive had been quiet, the rhythm of the windshield wipers and the soft jazz from the car's speakers filling the silence. When they'd arrived at her apartment building, Daniel had insisted on walking her to the door with an umbrella. Standing in the shelter of her entryway, droplets of rain glittering in his hair, he'd suddenly seemed unsure of himself. "Emma, She'd never know what he'd been about to say because in that moment, she'd risen on her toes and pressed her lips to his. It had been impulsive, unexpected even to herself. For a heartbeat, he'd frozen. Then his free arm had encircled her waist, the umbrella forgotten as the rain soaked them both. When they'd finally pulled apart, breathless, he'd looked stricken. "I'm your boss. I'm 14 years older than you. This is between Emma and Daniel," she'd interrupted. "Not between an employee and her boss. Not between a 24-year-old and a 38-year-old. Just between us." He'd searched her face. "It's not that simple." "It can be," she'd whispered, "if we choose to make it so." Dr. Kapoor was a small woman with intelligent eyes and a gentle manner. She studied the latest scan results displayed on her computer, while Emma and Daniel waited, hands clasped between them. "The treatment is working," she said finally, turning to them with a cautious smile. "The tumor has reduced in size by approximately 20% since we began." That's a very positive response. Emma felt Daniel's hand tighten around hers. "What about the pain she's experiencing?" Daniel asked, his voice controlled but tense. Dr. Kapoor's expression grew more serious. "That's something we need to address. Pain at this stage could indicate several things." She turned to Emma. Can you describe it for me? Location, intensity, duration. Emma felt Daniel's eyes on her as she spoke. It's in my lower back, sometimes radiating down my left leg, usually a dull ache, but occasionally sharp. Worse at night, or when I've been sitting for too long. How long has this been happening? The doctor asked. About 3 weeks, Emma admitted. She felt rather than saw Daniel stiffen beside her. 3 weeks? He repeated. You told me it just started a few days ago. Dr. Kapoor watched this exchange carefully. Emma, I'd like to order an additional scan to check for any compression on your nerve roots, and we'll adjust your pain management regimen. She made notes in the computer. I'm also recommending you see our pain specialist, doctor. Lynn? Emma nodded, avoiding Daniel's gaze. Overall, this is good news, doctor. Kapoor reminded them. The treatment is working. We just need to manage the side effects more effectively. Outside in the hallway after the appointment, Daniel stopped walking and turned to Emma. 3 weeks? Why didn't you tell me? Emma looked at the polished floor. I didn't want to worry you. You've been under so much stress with the Chicago project, and Emma. His voice broke on her name. We agreed. No secrets about your health, not after last time. She finally met his eyes, seeing the hurt and fear behind his anger. I'm sorry. I thought I could handle it. His expression softened, and he pulled her gently into his arms, right there in the hospital corridor. You don't have to handle anything alone. That's what marriage means. Over his shoulder, Emma noticed a young nurse watching them with an expression she recognized all too well. Judgment, assumptions. The beautiful young woman with the older, wealthy man. The stereotype was so easy to believe. If only they knew the painful truth. Their relationship had progressed slowly at first, both aware of the complications, their professional connection, the age difference, the inevitable gossip. They'd been cautious. Daniel had insisted on assigning Emma to work with other partners at the firm to avoid any suggestion of favoritism. They'd kept their personal relationship private for months, but some things couldn't be hidden forever. The way his face lit up when she entered her room, the comfortable silence they could share, the deep understanding that had grown between them. It was Marissa, the firm's marketing director and Daniel's friend of 15 years, who had confronted them. People are talking, she told Daniel bluntly over lunch, while Emma was meeting with a client. And I know you well enough to see what's happening. Daniel had put down his fork. Is there a problem with my work? Of course not. But Daniel, she's practically a kid. She's 25 years old, Marissa, a talented professional with more insight and maturity than most people twice her age. Marissa had leaned forward. And what happens when she wants children? When you're 60 and she's 46? Have you thought about what you're taking from her? Daniel had gone pale. I've thought of nothing else. That evening, he'd come to Emma's apartment ashen-faced and troubled. He told her about the conversation, holding nothing back. Marissa might be right, he had said, pacing her small living room. You deserve someone who can give you a full life. Children, growing old together. Emma had watched him for a moment before speaking. Do you know what my father saw when I told my parents about us? She hadn't waited for his answer. He asked what I could possibly see in a man your age except financial security. Daniel had flinched. I told him I saw a man who listens, really listens, when I speak, who challenges my ideas not to defeat them, but to strengthen them, who treats me as an equal despite all the ways society tells him he should dominate. She'd crossed the room to him. I see a man who's learned from his mistakes and his successes, who doesn't need to prove himself to anyone, a man who makes me feel seen for who I truly am. She'd taken his hands in hers. People will always have opinions about us. They'll reduce what we have to stereotypes and assumptions. But they don't know us, Daniel. They don't know what we've built together. He'd searched her face. And children? A future? Those are our decisions to make together, when and if the time comes. She touched his cheek. I only know that I want my future to include you. 2 months later, he had proposed, not with an extravagant gesture or an oversized diamond, but during a quiet morning at his house, as they'd sat on his back porch watching the sunrise, sharing coffee in comfortable silence. I want every day to begin like this, he'd said simply, with you beside me. Back at their townhouse after the appointment, Emma curled up on the sofa while Daniel made tea in the kitchen. Through the doorway, she watched him move with efficient grace, his forearms exposed where he'd rolled up his shirt sleeves. He brought 2 steaming mugs into the living room and sat beside her, pulling her feet into his lap. Dr. Kapoor seemed encouraged, Emma said, cradling her tea. Daniel nodded, his hands automatically beginning to massage her feet, finding the pressure points that brought relief. She did, but I'm still worried about this pain you've been hiding. Emma sighed. I wasn't hiding it exactly, just minimizing. Why? She hesitated, then admitted the truth. Because every new symptom, every complication, I see how it terrifies you, how it ages you. His hand stilled. Emma, sometimes I feel like I've stolen your peace, she whispered. Like I came into your life with all this youth, promise, and made you love me, and then... Her voice caught, and then revealed I was broken after all. Daniel set her tea aside and moved closer, taking her face between his hands. Listen to me. You are the best thing that has ever happened to me. The absolute best thing. Whatever we face together. Emma leaned into his touch. They all think I married you for your money, for security. If they only knew. Let them think what they want. His blue eyes held hers steadily. We know the truth. The truth had revealed itself just 3 weeks before their wedding. The headaches had begun first. Not terrible, just persistent. Then dizziness. Emma had blamed stress and wedding planning. Daniel had insisted she see a doctor. The diagnosis had come like a thunderclap on a clear day. A brain tumor, location making it challenging to operate, treatment required immediately. They'd sat together in yet another doctor's office, stunned into silence as the neurologist had explained the options, prognosis, statistics. Later in Daniel's car, Emma had turned to him with devastated eyes. I understand if you want to postpone the wedding, or ... She couldn't finish the sentence. Daniel had looked at her with such fierce intensity that her breath had caught. Emma Porter, I am going to marry you in exactly 3 weeks as planned, and then we're going to fight this together, and then we are going to have a long, beautiful life together. In that order. But what if? No what ifs. Only certainties. And the only certainty I need is you. He'd taken her hand and pressed it to his heart. This doesn't change how I feel about you. It doesn't change our plans. It only makes me more determined to treasure every single day we have. Emma had felt tears spill down her cheeks. People will talk. They'll say you're trapped now, that you're only marrying me out of pity or obligation. Let them talk, he'd said. They've been talking since the day we got together. Too young, too old. Boss, employee, they'll always find something. He'd wiped her tears away gently. The only voices that matter are yours and mine is saying, unequivocally, that I want to marry you, tumor and all. And so they had married, in a small ceremony with only their closest friends and family present. Emma had worn a simple ivory dress that skimmed her slender figure, her hair loose around her shoulders. Daniel had looked at her as she walked down the aisle with an expression of such pure joy that for a moment, all thoughts of illness had vanished. They had modified their vows slightly, where traditionally they would have promised in sickness and in health. They had instead pledged through treatment and recovery, a subtle declaration of their refusal to accept any outcome but survival. The treatment had begun immediately after a brief honeymoon on the Maine coast. Radiation, then chemotherapy. Emma had lost weight, lost her lustrous hair, lost days to nausea and fatigue, but she had not lost her determination, nor had Daniel lost his steadfast presence at her side. Now, 6 months into their marriage and treatment, they settled into their evening routine. Daniel prepared a light dinner that Emma might be able to keep down. They ate together at the kitchen island, talking about ordinary things, a new design project, a book Emma was reading, plans for the small garden when spring came. These ordinary moments had become precious, islands of normalcy in a sea of medical terminology and uncertainty. After dinner, as Emma rested on the sofa, Daniel sat beside her with his laptop, working on revisions to a sustainable housing project. Without looking up from his screen, he found her hand and held it while he worked, the unconscious gesture speaking volumes. Emma watched him, the concentration in his face, the confidence in his movements, the occasional smile when he solved a design problem. At 40, Daniel Whitman was in his prime, professionally accomplished, physically fit, emotionally mature. Women his own age regularly expressed interest, something his assistant took particular delight in reporting to Emma with raised eyebrows. Yet, he had chosen her, and when illness had threatened to take her away from him, he had only drawn closer, never wavering. "What are you thinking?" Daniel asked, catching her gaze. "That I'm lucky," she said simply. He set aside his laptop. "I'm the lucky one." Even with all of this, she gestured vaguely at herself, thinner now with a scarf covering her head where her beautiful hair had been. Daniel moved closer, gathering her carefully into his arms. "Especially with all of this, because this, the treatment, the doctors, the pain, this is temporary. But you, Emma Whitman, you are my forever." She nestled against his chest, listening to the steady beat of his heart. "Promise?" "With everything I am," he whispered into her hair. Outside their window, the city lights sparkled in the gathering darkness. Within their home, they held each other. These two people separated by 14 years, but united by something far stronger than age could ever divide them. The painful truth that had shocked their friends and family, that had generated whispers and speculation, wasn't that a beautiful young woman had married a man 14 years her senior for his money or security. It wasn't that she had trapped him, or that he had exploited her. The painful truth was that sometimes life gives you love just before it threatens to take everything else away. And in those moments, the only choice is to hold on with both hands to what matters most. Each precious day, each shared breath, each moment of connection in the face of uncertainty. For Emma and Daniel, that truth wasn't painful anymore. It was simply their story, a love made more urgent, more tender, and ultimately more profound by the challenges they faced together. As night fell completely, they remained entwined on the sofa, neither rushing to move. Tomorrow would bring another treatment, another test, another battle in their ongoing war. But tonight was theirs alone, and in the quiet darkness of their home, that was more than enough.